Hi everybody, this is Sultana Nosrati and I'm an LCSW. Today we're going to dive right in and we're going to talk about boundaries, which is admittedly something a lot of us have a really hard time with. We hear it all the time, and I know I preach it all the time as a therapist. You've got to have good boundaries. So most of my patients want to do it, but they struggle to first understand why it's so important to have good boundaries, and two, how to go about establishing them. So we're going to cover both of those topics today, and I hope you find it helpful. So the first thing we want to know is, why do you need boundaries? Why is it important? Well, it's very simple. It helps us avoid getting overwhelmed. If you have healthy boundaries with people around you, you tend to have a pretty well balanced life, which, let's face it, we could all use a little balance, especially this year, right? Not having healthy boundaries can easily lead to stress, anger, anxiety, hopelessness, all of those things, which are really unpleasant. Well, the way that it can lead to stress is if you don't have good boundaries and you tend to take on more and more tasks for people that you care about, or people at work, or with your friends, you're increasing the level of stress because you're not really leaving a whole lot for yourself. Anger and anxiety are another unfortunate result. Anger comes from feeling like you're being taken advantage of. You're handling all this stuff, you're doing all of this for this person at work, for this person at home, and you start feeling resentment and anger. Anxiety is another thing we mentioned, which is basically the result of feeling like you're not getting it done. So you're worried about not getting it done. And the reason you're worried about not getting it done is because you had way too much on your plate to begin with. It makes us more productive in the long run to have healthy boundaries because we're better able to balance, which I mentioned earlier. Your sense of obligation to ourselves needs to be mitigated by our sense of obligation to others, and vice versa, which means you'll ensure that you have time and energy to get things done, and you'll do it in a way that's less resentful and angry, which we've all been there, I think, right? It also makes for better relationships. If you have healthy boundaries, there's there's less imbalance in the relationship, which, again, that's the whole key for long-term relationships to exist. And it really doesn't matter. I always say that if it's two people involved, the same rules apply, whether it's a personal relationship or a work relationship or a friendship or an intimacy situation. It's all the same, and you need to have good boundaries. And having that means that you're less likely to cripple your partner or your coworker. If you're not having good boundaries, you're either doing too much, which makes the other person feel like they're not really needed or that they're not capable of doing what it is they need to do. And sometimes not having good boundaries means that someone feels like they have a right to tell you what to do and say, although supervisors do. In relationships, it's important to balance that out and feel like there's a partnership. That's usually when there's great success. So those are some reasons why it's important to have good boundaries. Now, the question I get asked all the time is, how do I handle this situation or that situation? How do I get good boundaries? Well, the first thing you need to do is to be honest with yourself in identifying what your needs are, but also what your limitations are. You see, a lot of people don't give much thought to what their actual needs are. And sometimes they get mixed up with wants. I'm not talking about wants, like I could really use a nice car, but that's not really a need, it's a want. Does that make sense? So you want to be able to differentiate between the difference when you're trying to figure out where your boundaries need to be and understand your limitations. How much can I reasonably take on and still be a decent human being that's not stressed, angry, or feeling vulnerable? Once you know what the need is, and you know what your limitations are, it's now a matter of just respecting it. And the first thing in respecting it is recognizing my golden rule, which is, you're not more important than anybody else, but no one else is more important than you. So if I have a need and you have a need, I need to meet my need first, in order to adequately meet your need. I know, it sounds kind of backwards, but it's true. You know, an interesting thing happened. I've been flying a lot back and forth from California to North Carolina, and I've flown a lot throughout my life. And I don't really pay much attention when the when the stewardess comes up and she gives you this lecture and she's holding these things up. And I always remember noting to myself when she says, if the oxygen pressure changes in the cabin, oxygen masks will float down. Please put the mask over yourself before even placing it on a child. And I'm like, really? As a mother, it is my responsibility to take care of my child first. Yes and no. See, if you don't put the mask over yourself first, you're both likely not to make it to the time where you get the mask on your child. In putting the mask on for yourself, you're able to better take care of your child, put on the mask, ensure their safety, and so forth. So, it's important to remember that rule. I'm not important than you, and you're not more important than me. Bottom line. So if I have a need and you have a need, I'm going to meet my need first. And that's not selfish. Oftentimes we're being accused of being selfish, and it is a thin line, but you want to make sure you're balancing it out. Now, if I have a want and you have a need and I have a responsibility for you, then I should take care of your need first before then trying to address my want. So you see how that can get balanced, right? So the other thing is really important in setting boundaries is understand how to communicate when it comes to tasks or things that you're not comfortable with. So, and work, for example, I used to do a whole lot of things. I used to train other psychotherapists. I used to do a bunch of different tasks. I had a department that I had to manage. So understandably, I would get totally overwhelmed. So I started setting tasks for myself and feeling like, okay, I can't. So what I learned to do is tell my supervisor, hey, I've got this, and this going on, but I also have this that you asked me to do. What's the priority? And basically what you're letting them know is that this is what your limitation is, i.e. boundary, and this is what I can do for you, and this is what I can't do for you. And it's a very professional way to kind of set yourself and have a good boundary, even with someone that's supervising you. At home, it's the same thing, especially women. We tend to go to work, come home, start dinner, complete all these tasks, manage the kids, and slowly we get angrier and angrier because we're not really having good boundaries with our spouse, or sometimes we're not even having good boundaries with our kids. The way to do that is, again, communicate. It's really not as hard as you think it is. It just feels like it's going to be. And truth be told, when you're doing that, if you have never done it before, it can feel awkward. But I got good news. Not going to kill you to do it. It actually helps. So one of the things you can do is, instead of saying, you're not helping me enough, what you can say is, hey, so I've been working all day. I really have a hard time. Do you think that maybe you can do dinner 3 nights a week and I'll handle the others? Right? So having boundaries. When a friend asks you to do something, the desire is to want to help. You want to do it. But you should first stop and think about, how do you feel? Do I feel overwhelmed right now? Do I feel like I could take this on? And if you can, you do it and you set a boundary, which means how much time are you going to devote to this particular task so that you can still do what you need to do, right? And if you can't, it's okay. A real friend or a real family member that loves you and cares about you is not going to, they might be disappointed, but they're not going to reject you because you didn't do it. What you need to do is just communicate. I would love to help you with this, or I would love to do this. It's just not really a good time for me. Can I maybe help you next week? The other time is, sometimes we get asked to do things we're not comfortable doing. It's not that we don't have the time to do it. We're just not comfortable doing it. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm just not comfortable doing this. I don't feel right about doing this. And it's okay to tell somebody that you're not okay with something, or that you don't want to do it because it makes you uncomfortable. That is your right. The consequences are what they are, but the bottom line is your right. And the more you stick to what it is that you genuinely feel is right, the better off you'll be. The thing about setting boundaries is, once you set the boundary, you don't move it around. I tell my patients this all the time. You set a boundary and then you moved it around for this person and you moved it around for that way. So you set a boundary in the sand and you kept moving it, and now you're in the middle of the ocean. Totally frustrated, angry, overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, what have you. set the boundary, make sure it's one that you can stand behind, and then just stick to it. Those who care about you will stick around. Those that don't, won't. So that's another key that's really important. Remember, you only control your perceptions and your behaviors. So you can only hold the line for yourself, but you can't hold it for others, which means if they reject your boundary, know when it's time to walk away. It's hard to walk away. But when we're in a situation that's not appropriate and our boundaries are being crossed, you really have to think about more than just what you stand to lose in the moment if you hold your boundary. You also have to think about the long-term consequences of being in a situation that's not healthy. So if your boundaries aren't being respected, it's really a good idea to think about, okay, do I really need to be here? And can I just walk away? Especially if you cannot, which we know, you cannot change the other person. You can't make that person respect your boundary, but you can still hold the line. And that's what's important. So coping strategies for holding boundaries is reminding yourself, one, I'm not going to die if I say no. It's okay. If someone makes you feel uncomfortable, it's okay to say, hey, I'm not comfortable. And if it's a cultural situation, which I come across a lot in my personal life, I just walk away. I know when to hang up the phone. I know when to get up and go. I have had to learn to do that so that I don't get angry and so that I don't feel overwhelmed. And that's another really positive thing about understanding the time and sticking to it. So that's one way to take care of yourself during that time. Take breaths. If you're in a situation where you know you're going to have to assert yourself, especially if it's a boundary issue, take a deep breath. Just keep breathing. And then when you figured out exactly what you want to say and how you want to say it, then you approach the person and you let them know. So I hope that this helped you, and I hope you found today's video helpful. If you like what you see in here, please hit like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, feel free to put that in the comment section of this particular video. And if you want to hear about a specific topic, feel free to send me an email. I'm always happy to hear from you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.